Please don't touch me. Elena's scream tore through the wedding suite. Blood seeped through the white lace of her dress, not her blood. Victor's, from where she'd clawed his face 4 days ago when he'd held her down one last time, whispering, "This is my goodbye gift to your new husband." Now Dominic Hale stood frozen, staring at the purple-black handprints circling her throat, the cigarette burns dotting her collarbone like obscene pearls, the bite marks on her shoulders still scabbed and raw. His hand, the hand that had killed 17 men, hung in the air between them, trembling. "Who did this to you?" The way he said it, quiet, dead final, made Elena realize something terrifying. She'd just married Chicago's most dangerous man, and he was about to start a war. Over her. Subscribe now and comment your city below. Let's see how far Elena's fight for justice reaches. This is where everything changes. The wedding had ended 90 minutes ago, but Elena could still taste champagne and lies. Her father's toast echoed in her head. "To my beautiful daughter and her new husband, may you find the happiness you both deserve." The guests had applauded. Nobody mentioned that Elena had been crying throughout the ceremony. Nobody asked why the bride looked terrified instead of joyful. "Mrs. Hale," Dominic's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "I asked you a question." Elena pressed harder against the bedroom door, her fingers white-knuckled on the handle. "It's nothing. I bruise easily." "Don't." The single word carried a weight that made her knees weak. "Don't lie to me. Not about this. You don't get to suddenly play concerned husband." Elena's voice cracked. "This marriage is a transaction. You said so yourself at the altar." Dominic moved then, but away from her. He walked to the far side of the suite, deliberately putting distance between them. The gesture was so unexpected that Elena's panic momentarily receded. "Your father told me you were difficult," Dominic said quietly, his back to her. "Temperamental. Said you'd need a firm hand to keep you in line." Elena laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "And what else did dear Richard tell you about his precious daughter?" Dominic turned slowly. In the dim light, his face was all harsh angles and predatory focus. "He said you'd run away twice, that you had a habit of defying him, that you needed someone strong enough to control you." He paused. "He also said you were a virgin, but those bruises tell a different story." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "I don't understand." "The bruises, Elena." He gestured toward her exposed collarbone. "They're old, fading, which means whoever put them there did it before tonight, before you became my responsibility." His jaw clenched. "So I'll ask one more time, and I need the truth. Who hurt you? Why do you care?" The question burst out of her, desperate and confused. "You bought me, that's what this was. My father sold me to settle his debts, and you paid because you needed a respectable wife. That's the deal." "The deal," Dominic said slowly, dangerously, "was that I would marry Richard Whitmore's daughter in exchange for his loyalty and his shipping connections. The deal did not include his daughter arriving at my door covered in another man's fingerprints, like she's been someone's punching bag for years." Elena felt something crack inside her chest. She'd spent so long building walls, learning to hide and survive, that she'd forgotten what it felt like when someone actually saw her, actually noticed. "Victor Langston," she heard herself say. The name tasted like blood and ash. Dominic's expression didn't change, but something lethal flickered behind his eyes. "Langston, your father's business partner?" "Yes." "How long?" Elena closed her eyes. She was so tired of lying. "Since I was 17, 5 years." The silence that followed was so complete she could hear her own heartbeat thundering. When she opened her eyes, Dominic hadn't moved, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides, the knuckles white. "Your father knew." It wasn't a question. "My father arranged it." The truth spilled out like poison she'd been holding too long. "Victor wanted me. My father needed Victor's money, so he told me it was my duty to make this sacrifice for the family. That a good daughter puts her family's needs first." Jesus Christ. Dominic ran both hands through his dark hair, the first sign of real agitation she'd seen from him. "How many people know about this?" "Just the 3 of us." Victor made sure of that. He said if I told anyone, he'd ruin my father completely. "And my father," her laugh was hollow, "my father said if I embarrassed him by making this public, he'd make sure I never saw daylight again. That I'd spend my life in an institution where nobody would believe a word I said." Dominic crossed the room in 3 strides. Elena flinched, pure instinct, but he stopped just short of touching her. his hands hovering near her shoulders like he wanted to steady her, but didn't dare. "Look at me," he commanded softly. She did. Up close, she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the way his jaw worked as he fought for control. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice low and intense. "You are my wife now. That means you're under my protection. That means anyone who touches you, anyone who hurts you, anyone who even looks at you wrong, they answer to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't need your protection." Elena shot back even as her voice trembled. "I need my freedom. I need to not be anyone's property. One problem at a time, Mrs. Hale." His lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it wasn't so cold, so predatory. "First we deal with Victor Langston, then we'll discuss the terms of our arrangement and what freedom looks like for you. You can't touch him. My father will—" "Your father," Dominic interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade, "just sold you to the most dangerous man in Chicago. If he was worried about protecting you, he wouldn't have done that, which means either he's too stupid to live or he knew exactly what he was doing when he threw you into my world." Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your father used you as a bargaining chip twice, once with Langston and once with me." Dominic stepped back, giving her space again. "The question is why? What does Richard Whitmore gain from having his daughter married to me while still being victimized by his business partner?" The question hit Elena like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on surviving day to day that she'd never stepped back to see the bigger picture. But now, with Dominic's words echoing in her mind, pieces started clicking into place with sickening clarity. "Insurance," she breathed. "He's playing both sides. Elaborate." Elena's mind raced, the fog of fear clearing as cold logic took over. "Victor's been talking about expanding into your territory for months. He thinks he's smart enough to challenge you. But he's also paranoid. He knows you could destroy him if you wanted to. So my father—" She felt sick. "My father married me off to you to secure protection through family ties. But he kept Victor's abuse secret to maintain their business alliance. If Victor makes a move against you and wins, my father's protected through their partnership. If you destroy Victor, my father's protected through marriage to your family." Smart girl. Dominic's approval felt like a warm current in the cold room. "Your father's a snake, but he's a clever one. He's been hedging his bets, keeping one foot in each camp." "What are you going to do?" Elena asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Dominic walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline glittering below like a field of broken glass. "Victor Langston has been cutting into my shipping routes for 2 years, bribing my dock workers, spreading rumors about my organization. I've been patient because direct war is expensive and messy and draws federal attention I don't need." He turned back to her, and the expression on his face made Elena shiver. "But now he's given me a reason that's personal. And when I make things personal, I don't just win, I eradicate." "He'll know it came from me," Elena said, panic rising again. "He'll know I told you, and he won't do anything," Dominic interrupted, his voice flat and final. "Because by the time I'm done, Victor Langston won't be in any position to threaten you or anyone else ever again. You're going to kill him." Elena didn't know how she felt about that. Relief, horror, savage, satisfaction. "No." Dominic's smile was razor-sharp and utterly terrifying. "I'm not going to kill him. Death is too quick, too easy, too merciful for what he's done to you. I'm going to destroy him legally, publicly, and permanently. I'm going to take everything he has, his business, his reputation, his freedom, and make sure he spends the rest of his miserable life in a cage surrounded by men who know exactly what he is. Predators like Langston don't do well in prison, Elena, especially not when everyone knows they're rapists." Elena stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with everything she'd heard about Dominic Hale. The rumors painted him as ruthless, violent, a man who solved problems with bullets and bodies. But this calculated, cold vengeance was somehow more terrifying than simple murder. "Why, she whispered, why go through all that trouble for someone you were forced to marry? Someone you don't even know." The room tilted. Elena grabbed the edge of the dresser to steady herself. "I was 17, Stockton." Dominic continued, still looking out the window like he couldn't bear to face her. Too young to do anything about it, too powerless to protect her. My father knew, I'm sure he knew the way fathers always know when something's destroyed their child. But he was more concerned about maintaining the business relationship than getting justice for Isabella. So I watched that man walk free, watched him smile at her funeral, watched him continue to prosper, while my sister rotted in the ground. He turned to face Elena fully, and the pain in his eyes was stark and terrible. I swore on her grave that I would never be that powerless again, that I would never let another man use his power to destroy someone weaker and get away with it. That's why I built my empire the way I did, not just for money or influence, but for the power to protect people who can't protect themselves. I'm sorry, Elena whispered because she didn't know what else to say. Don't be sorry. Be ready to fight. Dominic's expression hardened again, the vulnerability disappearing behind cold steel. Because this won't be easy. Your father will try to protect Langston. He's too invested in that relationship to let it go without a fight. There will be lawyers' threats, attempts to discredit you. You'll have to testify to face them in court, to have every intimate detail of your abuse picked apart by strangers who'll try to make it your fault. Can you do that? Elena thought about the past 5 years. The fear, the shame, the nights she'd scrubbed her skin raw, trying to feel clean again. She thought about her father's cold dismissal, Victor's cruel hands, the way she'd learned to make herself small and silent and invisible just to survive. Then she thought about Dominic's sister, a 14-year-old girl who'd had no one to fight for her, who'd died thinking she was alone and worthless and broken beyond repair. Yes, Elena said, her voice steady and sure. I can do that. Good. Dominic pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer, Margaret Chen. She's the best in the city, specializes in cases like this. Tonight, you're going to give her a full statement. Tomorrow, we start building the case. And Elena, he waited until she met his eyes. You're not alone anymore. You have my name, my resources, and my protection. Anyone who comes for you has to go through me first. And I promise you they won't make it past me alive. Something in Elena's chest loosened, a knot she'd carried for so long, she'd forgotten it was there. She still didn't know if she could trust Dominic Hale, but she could trust this Victor Langston had hurt someone under Dominic's roof, worn his ring, carried his name. And Dominic protected what was his with the kind of ruthless efficiency that made empires tremble. I don't know if I can trust you, Elena admitted. You can't, Dominic said bluntly. Not yet. Trust has to be earned, and I haven't earned yours. But you can trust this Victor Langston violated someone who belongs to me now. Whether this marriage is real or not, whether you stay with me after this is over or not, right now you're mine. And I don't let anyone hurt what's mine without paying a price so steep they wish I just killed them. The possessiveness in his words should have frightened her. Instead, for the first time in 5 years, Elena felt something that might have been hope. The lawyer arrived within 45 minutes. Margaret Chen was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who moved with the precision of a surgeon and the confidence of someone who'd won cases everyone said were unwinnable. She set up in Dominic's study, pulling out recording equipment and legal pads with practiced efficiency. Mrs. Hale, Margaret said, her voice kind but professional. I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me everything. Every detail you can remember. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out. Elena sat in the leather chair across from Margaret, acutely aware of Dominic standing by the door like a sentinel. She'd expected him to leave to give her privacy, but he'd simply positioned himself there and showed no signs of moving. Do you want him to stay? Margaret asked gently, noticing Elena's glance. Elena thought about it. Part of her wanted to be alone, to not have Dominic hear the worst parts. But another part, the part that had been alone for 5 years, didn't want him to leave. He can stay, Elena decided. All right. Margaret clicked on the recording device. Let's start with the first time Victor Langston assaulted you. When was it and what happened? Elena took a shaky breath. It was 3 months after my 17th birthday. My father was hosting a business dinner at our house. He did that a lot, trying to impress potential investors. Victor had been coming to our house for years. I'd known him since I was maybe 12. He was always nice to me, brought me gifts, asked about school. I thought he was just being kind. What happened that night? Margaret's pen moved across paper in quick, precise strokes. He saw everything. Victor had me pinned against the bookshelf, his hand. Elena swallowed hard. My father told me to go to my room. Just like that. Elena, go to your room, like I was being punished. Did you hear what they said to each other after you left? Dominic made a sound like a wounded animal. Elena glanced at him. His face was stone, but his hands were shaking with barely contained rage. Plans for you, Margaret repeated carefully. Did your father elaborate on what he meant? Not then. But a week later, he sat me down and told me Victor had made an offer. He wanted to court me, that's the word my father used. Court. Like we were living in the 1800s. Elena's laugh was bitter. My father said it would be good for the family, for the business, that I should be honored. A successful man like Victor is interested in me. What did you say? I said no. I said I was 17. I wanted to go to college. I didn't want to date anyone, especially not someone my father's age. Elena's voice strengthened with old anger. My father slapped me, hard enough that I fell. Then he told me I was being selfish and ungrateful, that the family was in financial trouble and I needed to do my part to help. Did he specify what kind of financial trouble? Gambling debts. My father had been betting on sports horses, cards, anything he could lose money on. He owed Victor $300,000. Elena met Margaret's eyes. That's what I was worth to my father. $300,000 in a business alliance. Margaret wrote for a long moment. What happened after you refused? Every time. Elena's voice rose. Every single time I came home crying, every time I told my father what Victor was doing, he said I was overreacting, that Victor was just being affectionate, that I needed to grow up and accept adult relationships. When did the assaults escalate? Elena closed her eyes. This was the part she'd never told anyone. My 18th birthday, my father threw a party, 200 people, live music, champagne fountains. It was supposed to be this grand celebration. Victor gave me a diamond necklace in front of everyone. Then while the party was still going on, he cornered me in my bedroom. Your bedroom in your father's house. Margaret's hand touched Elena's gently. I'm so sorry. After that, it became routine. Elena continued needing to get it all out now. Victor would call my father would tell me to be ready. Sometimes I went to Victor's house. Sometimes he came to ours. Sometimes he'd rent hotel rooms, always with my father's knowledge and approval. How often? 2 to 3 times a week for 5 years. Elena opened her eyes and looked directly at Margaret. Until 2 weeks ago when my father told me I was getting married to Dominic Hale. Did Victor know about the marriage? Yes. He was furious. Came to our house screaming at my father. I heard them fighting. Victor said I belonged to him, that my father had promised me to him first. Elena's stomach churned. That's when I realized my father had literally promised me to 2 different men. He'd told Victor I'd be his, and he'd told Dominic's people I'd make a good wife. He was trying to keep both deals running. Dominic spoke for the first time. When was the last time Langston touched you? Elena pulled down the collar of her nightgown, revealing the full extent of the bruising. 4 days before the wedding, he said it was his last chance before I became untouchable. That once I belonged to you, he couldn't risk it anymore. So he wanted to... She couldn't finish. He wanted to mark you, Dominic said quietly. Make sure I knew you'd been his first. Yes. Elena's tears finally fell. He was rougher than usual. Angrier. He left these bruises deliberately. The cigarette burns too. Said they were his wedding gift to you, a reminder that you were getting damaged goods. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. When Elena looked at Dominic, his face was perfectly calm, but his eyes promised apocalyptic violence. Margaret cleared her throat diplomatically. Mr. Hale, perhaps? I'm staying, Dominic said flatly. Margaret nodded and turned back to Elena. Do you have any physical evidence, medical records, photographs, text messages? My father took my phone 2 weeks ago, said I wouldn't need it anymore, that you'd provide me with a new one, Elena said, looking at Dominic. But I never deleted anything. Every text Victor sent me telling me when and where to meet him, what to wear, what he wanted me to do. It's all still there. We'll get the phone back, Dominic promised darkly. What else? There's a doctor, Dr. Thomas Harrison in Lincoln Park. Victor took me to him when... Elena's voice failed. When what? Margaret asked gently. When I got pregnant. I was 19. Victor took me to Dr. Harrison and paid him $5,000 in cash to perform an abortion. No questions asked, no consent forms, no follow-up care. Just took care of the problem. Dominic punched the wall. The drywall cracked under his fist, leaving a bloody imprint. I'm sorry, Adolph. Elena whispered automatically. Don't, Dominic said roughly, cradling his bleeding knuckles. Don't apologize for what they did to you. Don't you dare apologize. Margaret pulled Elena's attention back. Anyone else who might have witnessed or known about the abuse, Elena forced herself to focus. Our housekeeper, Mrs. Rosa Chen, she saw everything, Victor coming and going, the bruises I couldn't hide, but she never said anything, but I know she knew. And Victor's driver, James. He drove me to the hotels sometimes. And Michael, Victor's assistant, he'd book the rooms, make all the arrangements. Anyone from your father's side? His secretary, Linda. She'd call me sometimes with reminders about appointments with Victor. Elena thought harder. And there was one time I tried to run away. I was 20. Made it all the way to New York. I was going to disappear, start a new life. But my father, she swallowed the old bitterness. He told me if I didn't come back immediately, he'd report my mother's jewelry as stolen and have me arrested. Your mother's jewelry? Margaret's voice sharpened. My mother died when I was 10. Breast cancer. She left me her jewelry, rings, necklaces, a few pieces that had been in her family for generations. They were the only things I had of hers. Elena's voice broke. My father said I'd stolen them from his safe, that he'd press charges unless I came home immediately. So I came back, and Victor was waiting. How long did Langston have access to you after you returned from New York? Elena closed her eyes. 2 days. My father locked us in the guest house together, said I needed to learn my lesson about obedience and loyalty, that Victor would teach me what happened when I tried to run. 2 days. Margaret repeated, her voice carefully neutral, even as her hand tightened on her pen. Were you given food or water during that time? Victor brought food when he felt like it. Elena couldn't finish. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Dominic's labored breathing as he fought for control. Margaret clicked off the recording device. That's enough for tonight. Elena, you've given me more than enough to start building a case. We'll need medical documentation, witness interviews, and we'll subpoena your phone records and Victor's financial records. But what you've told me tonight, it is powerful testimony. Is it enough, Elena asked, to convict him? It's enough to destroy him, Margaret said firmly. With your testimony, the physical evidence, and the witnesses will interview Victor Langston is going to prison for a very, very long time. After Margaret left, Elena sat in the study feeling scraped raw and empty. Dominic poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one. Drink, he ordered. Elena drained it in one burning swallow. The alcohol hit her empty stomach like fire, making her gasp. My father will fight this, she said quietly. He needs Victor too much to let this go. Let him fight, Dominic's voice was ice. Your father made a critical miscalculation when he arranged this marriage. He thought he could play both sides, use our marriage for protection while maintaining his relationship with Langston. What he didn't realize is that by making you my wife, he gave me legal standing and personal motivation to destroy everyone who's hurt you. What about Victor's lawyers? He has money connections. I have more. Dominic's smile was predatory. And I have something he doesn't, the moral high ground. Victor Langston is a rapist who preyed on a minor. Your father is a man who sold his daughter to pay gambling debts. When this goes public, and it will go public, they won't have a friend left in this city. Elena set down her glass with shaking hands. I'm scared. Good. Dominic's voice softened slightly. Fear keeps you sharp. But Elena, he waited until she met his eyes. You're not alone in this fight. You have me, and I don't lose. Why are you doing this? Elena asked again, because she still couldn't quite believe it. You could just ignore this. Keep me as a trophy wife, show me off at parties, let me be seen and not heard. That's what everyone expected. Dominic was quiet for a moment. I told you about Isabella. What I didn't tell you is what happened after she died. My father, he knew who'd raped her. I'm certain of it. But he did nothing because that man was valuable to his business. So I waited. I built my power base, made myself indispensable to my father's organization. And on my 21st birthday, I killed the man who'd raped my sister. Made it look like a rival gang hit. Elena's breath caught. Did your father know it was you? He knew. And he did nothing because by then I was too valuable to punish. I'd proven I was ruthless enough to survive in our world. Dominic's expression was bleak. But killing that man didn't bring Isabella back. It didn't undo what happened to her, and I realized revenge without justice is just murder. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't protect anyone else. So what changed? I did. I built my organization with one rule: no one preys on the vulnerable under my watch. No human trafficking, no exploitation, no using power to hurt people who can't fight back. Dominic met her eyes. Victor Langston violated that rule. He hurt you, and in doing so, he hurt someone under my protection. That's not something I can ignore, Elena. Even if you weren't my wife, even if this marriage was purely business. A predator operating in my city hurting vulnerable women needs to be stopped, and I'm going to stop him. Elena felt tears burn behind her eyes, but these were different, cleaner. What happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow we document your injuries properly. After that, we start gathering evidence and building the case. Dominic stood and offered his hand. Come on, I'll show you to your room. My room. Elena took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. You think I'm making you share my bed after what you just told me? Dominic's voice was almost gentle. I have a guest suite prepared. It's yours for as long as you need it. When and if we share a room, it'll be because you choose it. Not because you're obligated. Not because I own you. Because you want to. Elena felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she'd built to protect herself from hope. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. Dominic's smile was real this time, warming his dark eyes. I expected a spoiled society girl who'd married me for money and status. Instead, I got a survivor who's been fighting a war for 5 years. That takes strength most people don't have. I don't feel strong, Elena admitted. You will. Dominic led her down the hall to a beautifully appointed guest suite, all soft grays and whites, completely separate from his own rooms. Sleep. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. We have a lot of work to do. As Elena stood in her new room alone for the first time since the wedding, she looked at herself in the mirror. The bruises were stark against her pale skin, a roadmap of Victor's cruelty. But underneath them, Elena saw something she hadn't seen in 5 years. She saw a fighter. Tomorrow the war would begin. But tonight, for the first time since she was 17 years old, Elena fell asleep feeling safe. And that was worth more than all the champagne and lies in the world. Dawn broke over Chicago like a wound, all violent reds and purples bleeding across the skyline. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and for one disorienting moment forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back, the wedding, the confrontation, Dominic's promise to destroy Victor Langston. She sat up too fast and pain lanced through her ribs, an old injury from when Victor had pushed her down the stairs 2 years ago. Her father had told the emergency room she'd fallen while drunk. The doctors had believed him because 17-year-old girls were clumsy and dramatic, right? You're awake. Elena jumped. Dominic stood in her doorway holding a coffee cup, already dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her father's car. I knocked, he said. You didn't answer. I was starting to worry you'd run. Where would I go? Elena's laugh was hollow. Back to my father, to Victor. Good point. Dominic set the coffee on her nightstand. Dr. Sarah Mitchell will be here in an hour to do a full medical examination. She's a forensic specialist, works with assault survivors. She'll document everything properly for the legal case. Elena's stomach churned. Another examination. More strangers looking at me like I'm evidence. You are evidence, Dominic said bluntly. And I know that's dehumanizing and horrible. But it's also how we bury Langston. Every photograph, every measurement, every documented injury is another nail in his coffin. What if it's not enough? Elena wrapped her arms around herself. What if he gets a good lawyer and he already has a good lawyer, Morrison & Black, the best defense firm in Illinois. Dominic's smile was cold. They're very expensive and very effective, which is why we're going to make our case so airtight that even they can't create reasonable doubt. How? Witnesses, evidence, pattern of behavior. Dominic sat on the edge of her bed, careful to maintain distance. Victor didn't just hurt you, Elena. Men like him never stop at one victim. We find the others, we build an undeniable pattern, and we make it impossible for a jury to dismiss this as a he said, she said situation. Elena's breath caught. You think there are other victims? I'd bet my empire on it. Dominic's voice was grim. Margaret's already started investigating. We're looking into every woman who's worked for Langston, every business associate's daughter, every vulnerable person who's crossed his path in the last 20 years. And if we don't find anyone, Then we build the strongest case we can with what we have. Dominic stood, but I don't think that'll be a problem. Predators like Victor leave a trail of destruction. We just have to follow it. Dr. Sarah Mitchell arrived exactly on time carrying a medical bag that looked like it belonged in a crime scene investigation. She was a black woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and hands that moved with surgical precision. "Elena," she said warmly, shaking hands. "I'm Sarah. I've worked with Margaret Chen on dozens of cases like yours. I know this is invasive and uncomfortable, but I promise to be as gentle as possible." The examination took 90 minutes and felt like 90 hours. Dr. Mitchell photographed every bruise, every scar, every mark that Victor and her father's neglect had left. She measured healing times, documented old fractures that had never been properly treated, took samples for evidence that might still exist despite the time elapsed. "The bruising on your collarbone is approximately 4 days old," Dr. Mitchell murmured as she worked documenting everything with clinical precision. "Consistent with manual strangulation? The pattern suggests someone with large hands. I'd estimate male over 6 feet tall based on the span." "Victor is 6'2", Elena said quietly. "Good, that's corroborating detail." Dr. Mitchell moved to Elena's ribs. "These fractures, when did they occur?" 2 years ago. Victor pushed me down a flight of stairs when I tried to refuse him." Dr. Mitchell's jaw tightened, but her voice remained professional. "Were you seen by a doctor?" "Emergency room at Northwestern. They set the ribs, gave me painkillers. My father told them I'd been drunk and fallen." "Do you remember the doctor's name?" "Dr. Patel, I think. It was late at night. I was in so much pain. Everything's fuzzy." "We'll get those records." Dr. Mitchell made notes. "And these burn marks on your inner thighs." Elena closed her eyes. "Cigarettes. Victor would use them when I wasn't enthusiastic enough for his liking." "How many times?" "I stopped counting after 20. Dr. Mitchell put down her camera and took Elena's hand. "I need you to hear something. What Victor Langston did to you, this wasn't sex. This wasn't even rape in the conventional sense. This was systematic torture disguised as a relationship. The pattern I'm seeing here is consistent with sadistic abuse designed to break you psychologically as well as physically." Elena felt tears burning. "I know." "Do you?" Dr. Mitchell's voice was gentle but firm. "Because a lot of survivors minimize what happened to them. They say it wasn't that bad, or others have had it worse, or they somehow deserved it. But Elena, you were a child when this started. 17 years old, and Victor Langston spent 5 years breaking you down piece by piece. That's not your fault. That's his crime." After the examination, Elena dressed in the black pantsuit Dominic had provided. It fit perfectly, probably custom-made overnight, because that was apparently the kind of resources Dominic had access to. When she emerged from the guest room, he was waiting with Margaret. "Dr. Mitchell's preliminary report is damning," Margaret said without preamble. 23 documented injuries consistent with long-term physical and sexual abuse. Combined with your testimony and the witnesses we'll interview, this case is strong. But Elena heard the hesitation in Margaret's voice. "But we need to move fast. I've been making calls this morning. Langston knows something's wrong. Your father apparently tried to contact Victor last night, got stonewalled. Now Richard's trying to reach you." "Absolutely not," Dominic said flatly. "Elena doesn't speak to her father without legal counsel present." "Agreed." Margaret pulled out her phone, "which is why I've already filed for a restraining order against both Richard Whitmore and Victor Langston. Judge Marshall is reviewing it now." Elena's head spun. "This is moving so fast." "It has to," Margaret explained. "Once word gets out that you've lawyered up Langston, we'll start covering his tracks. We need to get ahead of it, freeze his assets, subpoena records, interview witnesses before they can be intimidated or paid off." Speaking of witnesses, Dominic said, his phone buzzing. He glanced at it and his expression darkened. "Your father's secretary just called my office. Linda Martinez says she has information about Langston's arrangement with your father." Elena's heart raced. Linda knew, oh, apparently so. Dominic's voice was grim, and apparently her conscience finally caught up with her. "She wants to meet today." They met Linda at a coffee shop in the Loop neutral territory where she'd feel safe. The woman looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight, her hands shaking as she wrapped them around a coffee cup she wasn't drinking. "Thank you for coming," Margaret said, her voice professional but kind. Linda looked at Elena with red-rimmed eyes. I'm so sorry. I should have said something years ago. I should have helped you. Why didn't you? Elena's voice was harder than she expected. Because I was scared. Linda's voice broke. I'm here on a work visa. Your father threatened to have me deported if I ever spoke about his private business arrangements. I have a daughter back in Mexico. I send her money for school, for food, for everything. If I lost this job, if I got deported, she swallowed hard. I told myself you were fine, that it wasn't my place to interfere in family matters. But I knew. God help me, I knew what was happening. What did you know? Margaret had her recorder running. Linda pulled a USB drive from her purse. Everything. Every email between your father and Victor. Every calendar entry scheduling your appointments. Every payment Victor made to Richard's accounts after. She couldn't finish. Dominic took the drive carefully. How long does this cover? 5 years, from the first time Richard scheduled you with Victor until 2 weeks before your wedding? Linda looked at Elena. I kept copies of everything. I told myself it was just good record keeping, but really, I think I knew someday someone would ask. Someday it would matter. It matters now, Margaret said firmly. Linda, this evidence is crucial. Are you willing to testify? Yes. Linda's voice strengthened. I have a daughter. She's 15, the same age you were when Victor started, when he started hurting you. If someone did to her what Victor did to you, I'd want someone to speak up, even if it was too late to stop it, even if all I could give was justice instead of protection. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you. After Linda left, Dominic, Margaret, and Elena sat in Dominic's car, reviewing the contents of the USB drive on a laptop. The evidence was devastating, hundreds of emails showing Richard explicitly arranging for Elena to meet Victor, discussing payment schedules, even joking about Elena's resistance in ways that made it clear both men knew she wasn't consenting. This is conspiracy, Margaret breathed. Human trafficking. Your father didn't just enable Langston, he actively facilitated the abuse in exchange for money. Can we arrest him? Elena asked. My father, can we arrest him today? Not yet. We need to build the case properly. Margaret's eyes gleamed, but soon, very soon. Dominic's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his expression went cold as winter. It's Langston. Elena's blood froze. Don't answer it. I'm going to answer it. Dominic held up a hand when Elena started to protest. And I'm putting it on speaker. I want you to hear this. He answered. Langston. Hale. Victor's smooth voice filled the car, making Elena's skin crawl. We need to talk, man to man. About your wife, about certain allegations I'm hearing she may have made, about coming to a reasonable arrangement before this gets ugly for everyone involved. Dominic's eyes never left Elena's face. What kind of allegations? Come now, Dominic. We're both businessmen. We both know Elena has always been emotionally unstable, dramatic, prone to exaggeration. Victor's tone was condescending, oily. I'm sure in her troubled state, she said things that aren't entirely accurate, things that could damage both our reputations if they became public. What things? Dominic's voice was perfectly neutral. Mischaracterizations of our relationship. We were involved, yes, but it was entirely consensual, entirely appropriate for two adults. She's simply upset that I ended things before her wedding. Victor sighed dramatically. I understand she's young and her feelings are hurt, but making wild accusations isn't the answer. Elena made a choked sound. Dominic reached over and squeezed her hand, his grip iron strong. Interesting theory, Dominic said mildly. How do you explain the bruises? There was a pause. What bruises? The ones shaped like your fingers, the cigarette burns, the healed fractures. Dominic's voice dropped to something deadly. All documented by a forensic medical examiner this morning. All photographed, measured, cataloged as evidence of systematic abuse spanning 5 years. I don't know what game you're playing, Hale. This isn't a game. Dominic's voice went cold. This is me telling you that you are finished. I have medical evidence. I have witness testimony. I have emails proving your arrangement with Richard Whitmore, and I'm going to use all of it to put you in a cage for the rest of your miserable life. You're threatening me over some lying little... Elena grabbed the phone from Dominic's hand. Say it, she hissed. Say what you were going to call me, Victor. I want it on record. Dead silence. That's what I thought. Elena continued, her voice shaking with rage. You're so brave when you have me locked in a room, when you have my father helping you, when I'm 17 and terrified and powerless, but now that I have someone fighting for me, now you're scared. Elena, sweetheart, you don't understand what you're doing. Don't call me sweetheart. Elena's voice cracked. Don't call me anything. You raped me for 5 years. You hurt me, you violated me, you made me hate myself. And you did it while my father took your money and looked the other way. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. Elena was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. Every detail, every assault, every threat. I'm going to stand in court and tell the world what kind of monster you are. No one will believe you. Victor's voice turned vicious, the mask slipping. I'm a respected businessman. You're a disturbed young woman with a history of lying and manipulation. Richard will testify that you're unstable, that you've always been difficult. My lawyers will tear you apart. By the time we're done, you'll be the villain in this story, not me. Maybe, Elena said, her voice steadying, but I'll still tell the truth, and some people will believe me, and that's enough. She hung up and handed the phone back to Dominic, her hands shaking. That was brave, Dominic said quietly. Also incredibly stupid. Now he knows we're coming for him. Good, Elena shot back. Let him run. Let him hire lawyers and call in favors. It won't matter. We have him. Margaret was already on her phone somehow. That phone call was recorded. He just admitted to a prior relationship with Elena, which means he can't claim you're making this up. He also threatened her, which we can use to get an emergency restraining order. Do it, Dominic said. I want Langston served today. I want him to know he can't touch Elena, can't call her, can't even think about her without violating a court order. They returned to the penthouse to find a situation spiraling out of control. Elena's phone, the new one Dominic had given her, was flooded with messages from unknown numbers. Her father had somehow got around the number and was calling every 5 minutes, each voicemail more desperate than the last. Elena, pick up. We need to talk about this misunderstanding before it gets out of hand. Elena, please. You're going to destroy the family, everything I've built. You can't do this. Elena, I'm begging you, call me back. We can fix this. Just call me back. Dominic listened to the messages with growing fury. He's not sorry. He's scared. There's a difference. I know, Elena said quietly. I need to see him before this goes any further. I need to say goodbye properly. Are you sure? No, but I need to do it anyway. Dominic arranged the meeting for that afternoon at Richard Whitmore's office. Neutral territory with Margaret present and Dominic as backup. When they walked into Richard's gleaming downtown office, Elena felt like she was stepping into a different life, one where she'd been powerless and afraid. Richard looked smaller than she remembered, older. His expensive suit couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes, the way his hands trembled as he stood to greet her. Elena, sweetheart, don't. Elena's voice was ice. You don't get to call me that. You lost that right the day you sold me to Victor Langston. Richard's face crumpled. I never meant for it to go so far. I thought Victor cared about you, that he'd treat you well. He raped me, Elena said flatly. He tortured me. He broke my ribs, burned me with cigarettes, forced me to have an abortion when I was 19. And you knew. You knew all of it, and you let it happen because he was paying you. I was trying to save the family. You were trying to save yourself. Elena's control shattered. You had $300,000 in gambling debts, and you traded your daughter's body to make them go away. Don't you dare pretend this was about the family. Richard sank into his chair. What do you want from me? I want you to tell the truth. Elena leaned forward. I want you to testify against Victor. To admit what you did, what he did, what you both did to me for 5 years. I want you to face the consequences of your choices. If I do that, I'll go to prison. You should go to prison, Elena said quietly. You sold your daughter to a rapist. You profited from my abuse. You threatened me when I tried to escape. You deserve to rot in a cell for the rest of your life. Elena, please. But I'll make you a deal, Elena interrupted. Testify against Victor. Give us everything, emails, financial records, testimony about the arrangement. Help us put him away for life. Do that, and maybe the prosecutor will offer you a plea deal instead of maximum sentencing. Richard's eyes lit with desperate hope. You do that for me. I'm not doing it for you, Elena said coldly. I'm doing it because putting Victor away matters more than punishing you. You're a coward and an enabler, but Victor's a predator. He's the bigger threat. What kind of plea deal? That's between you and the prosecutor, Margaret interjected. But I can tell you this, if you cooperate full, you're looking at maybe 5 to 7 years instead of 20 to life. If you fight us, we'll bury you next to Langston. Richard looked between them, calculating. Elena could see it in his eyes, the same cold assessment he'd always done, weighing costs versus benefits. You were never going to choose me, Elena said quietly, the realization settling over her like ice. Even now, even with all this evidence, all this testimony, you're not thinking about making things right. You're thinking about saving yourself. Richard didn't deny it. I'm done here. Elena stood. You have 48 hours to decide. Cooperate and testify against Victor, or go down with him. Your choice. Elena, wait. But Elena was already walking away. She'd said her goodbye. Some doors needed to stay closed. In the elevator, Dominic took her hand. How do you feel? Empty, Elena admitted. I thought confronting him would make me feel strong. Instead, I just feel sad. He's my father. He's supposed to protect me, and he's still choosing himself over me. That's who he is, Dominic said gently. People don't change their fundamental nature, Elena. Richard Whitmore has always put himself first. That's not going to change because you called him on it. The elevator doors opened on the parking garage. They were halfway to the car when Elena heard running footsteps behind them. Mrs. Hale, please. Elena turned to see Linda Martinez rushing toward them, her face pale with fear. What's wrong? Elena asked. I just got a call. Linda was breathless, terrified. From Victor's head of security. He said if I testified against Mr. Langston, I'd regret it. That accidents happen to undocumented immigrants all the time, and nobody investigates too carefully. Dominic stepped in front of both women, his expression murderous. Did he threaten you directly? He said my daughter in Mexico is very pretty, that it would be a shame if something happened to her. Linda's voice broke. I can't testify. I'm sorry, but I can't risk my daughter. You won't have to risk her, Dominic interrupted, because by tonight your daughter will be on a plane to Chicago with full security escort. By tomorrow she'll be enrolled in the best private school in the city with a full scholarship. And you'll both be under my protection 24/7 until this trial is over. Linda stared at him. Why would you do that? Because Victor Langston just made a critical mistake, Dominic said softly. He threatened a witness. That's a felony, and it tells me he's panicking. He turned to Margaret. Call Sarah Reeves at the DA's office. Tell her we have evidence of witness intimidation and we need to move fast. What about my daughter? Linda's voice was desperate. I have people in Mexico City. Good people. They'll have your daughter on a plane within 6 hours. Dominic pulled out his phone and started making calls. What's her name? Sophia Martinez. Sophia Martinez will be safe, Linda. You have my word. As Dominic coordinated security and Margaret called the prosecutor, Elena stood in the parking garage feeling something shift inside her. This was what power looked like. Not the kind of power her father and Victor had used to hurt people, the kind of power that protected the vulnerable and punished predators. And for the first time since her wedding night, Elena understood why people feared Dominic Hale. Because when he decided someone was under his protection, he didn't just defend them. He went to war for them, and God help anyone who got in his way. The prosecutor's office was chaos. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Reeves met them at the door, her expression a mixture of excitement and grim determination. Victor Langston's security chief just committed witness tampering on a recorded line, Sarah said without preamble, which means we have grounds to arrest Langston immediately on obstruction charges while we build the assault case. How fast can you move? Dominic asked. Warrant's being drafted now. We can have him in custody by tonight. Sarah turned to Elena. But I need you to understand something. Once we arrest him, this goes public. Every news outlet in Chicago will be covering it. Your name, your father's name, the allegations, it all comes out. Are you ready for that? Elena thought about 5 years of silence, 5 years of shame and fear, and believing she deserved what Victor did to her. Then she thought about Linda's daughter, about other women Victor might hurt if he stayed free. "I'm ready," Elena said. Sarah led them into a conference room where two other women were waiting. Both looked nervous, haunted, like they'd been carrying heavy secrets for too long. "Elena Hale, this is Sophie Martin and Rebecca Torres," Sarah said quietly. They came forward this morning after hearing rumors about an investigation into Victor Langston. Elena's heart stopped. "You're victims too." Sophie, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes and scars on her wrists, nodded. 4 years ago, I was an intern at Langston Industries. Victor said he'd mentor me, help me build a career in finance. Her voice cracked. He mentored me right into his bed. When I tried to quit, he threatened to blacklist me in the industry. Said no one would ever hire me again if I left on bad terms. "How long?" Elena asked gently. 8 months. Then I tried to kill myself, and my parents pulled me out of Chicago, sent me to live with family in California. Sophie met Elena's eyes. "I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad, that other people had it worse. But when I heard you were pressing charges, I realized I wasn't alone." Rebecca spoke next. Her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles were white. "Victor and my father were business partners. I was 22 waitressing while trying to finish college. Victor said he'd pay my tuition if I was nice to him." She laughed bitterly. Being nice turned out to mean letting him do whatever he wanted. For 2 years. "Did you tell your father?" Elena asked. "I tried. He said I was lucky a man like Victor was interested in me, that I should be grateful for his generosity." Rebecca's voice went flat. 3 months ago, Victor beat me so badly I had internal bleeding. The hospital asked questions. I lied and said I'd been mugged, but I kept the medical records, just in case. Sarah spread photographs across the table, medical records, text messages, emails. "With 3 victims, we have a pattern. With documented evidence spanning 6 years, we have proof of systematic predatory behavior. Ladies, if you're all willing to testify, we can put Victor Langston away for decades." "I'll testify," Sophie said immediately. "Me too," Rebecca added. They all turned to Elena. She looked at these 2 women strangers who'd survived the same monster she had and felt something powerful surge through her. They weren't just 3 victims. They were 3 survivors and about to become 3 witnesses, 3 women who refused to stay silent anymore. "Let's destroy him," Elena said. The plan came together with terrifying speed. Sarah would present the case to a grand jury tomorrow. 3 victims, medical evidence, financial records proving payment for sexual access, emails documenting the arrangements. Arrest warrants would be issued for both Victor Langston and Richard Whitmore. "Your father's going to flip," Sarah predicted. "The moment he realizes he's facing 20 years for human trafficking and conspiracy, he'll start talking. We'll offer him a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony against Langston." "What kind of sentence?" Elena asked. 5 to 7 years if he cooperates fully. Testifies, provides evidence, pleads guilty to reduced charges. Sarah's expression hardened. "I know that doesn't seem like enough for what he did to you, but putting Langston away for life is worth letting your father have a shorter sentence." Elena nodded. She hated that her father would get a deal, but Sarah was right. Victor was the bigger monster. They were leaving the prosecutor's office when Elena's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello. Is this Elena Hale?" A woman's voice, young and scared. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Jessica Chen. I heard you were investigating Victor Langston." The woman took a shaky breath. "He raped me 3 years ago. I was a hostess at his regular restaurant. He said he'd get me fired if I didn't do what he wanted." Elena's hand tightened on the phone. She looked at Dominic and mouthed, "Another victim." His expression went lethal. "Jessica, where are you right now?" Elena asked. "I'm at work, but I saw the news about him being investigated, and I thought maybe now someone would believe me." "We believe you," Elena said firmly. "Can you meet with us?" "With the prosecutor, we need your testimony, your evidence, anything you have." "I have text messages. And I took photos of the bruises. I never showed anyone, but I kept them." Jessica's voice broke. "I thought I was going crazy. Thought maybe I'd imagined how bad it was. But hearing that other women went through the same thing, I'm not crazy, am I?" "You're not crazy," Elena promised. "You're a survivor, and we're going to make sure Victor Langston pays for what he did to all of us." By the time they got back to the penthouse, Margaret had fielded calls from 6 more women. 6 women who'd been assaulted, threatened, or coerced by Victor Langston over the past decade. This isn't just rape, Margaret said, her voice shaking with fury. This is a serial predator who's been operating in plain sight for years. How did no one see this? How did he get away with it for so long? Because he chose his victims carefully, Dominic said grimly. Interns, waitresses, daughters of business associates, people with no power, no resources, no one to believe them if they spoke up. And he made sure they knew the consequences of talking would be worse than the consequences of staying silent. Until Elena spoke up, Sophie said quietly. She'd come back to the penthouse with them, too scared to be alone. You're the first one who had enough protection to fight back. The rest of us, we were on our own. Not anymore, Elena said fiercely. Now we're all together, and together we're going to bury him. The grand jury hearing was scheduled for the next morning. Elena barely slept that night, running through her testimony over and over, terrified she'd forget something crucial or say the wrong thing. When dawn finally came, she was exhausted but determined. Sarah Reeves presented the case with clinical precision. Medical evidence, text messages, financial records, and then one by one the victims testified. Sophie described 8 months of coercion and assault. Rebecca detailed 2 years of being traded like property between her father and Victor. Jessica talked about being threatened with homelessness if she refused, and more women, each with their own story, their own scars, their own evidence that Victor Langston was exactly the monster they claimed. Elena testified last. She walked the grand jury through 5 years of systematic abuse, her voice steady even as she described the worst moments. She showed them the photographs of her bruises, the medical records from the abortion, the emails where her father explicitly arranged for her to meet Victor. When she finished, the grand jury room was silent. The foreman, a middle-aged woman who'd been taking notes throughout, looked at Elena with tears in her eyes. Thank you for your courage. The grand jury deliberated for 37 minutes. When they returned, the foreman read the indictment on all counts: rape, sexual assault, battery, human trafficking, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. We find sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. We also find sufficient evidence to issue arrest warrants for Victor Langston and Richard Whitmore on charges of conspiracy and trafficking. Elena felt Dominic's hand find hers. It was done. The arrests were coming. Sarah pulled them aside after the hearing. Arrest teams are moving now. Langston first, then your father. I wanted to give you a heads up before it hits the news. How long? Dominic asked. Langston should be in custody within the hour, Richard by tonight. Sarah's smile was savage. And Elena, I just got word that Langston tried to board a private plane to Brazil 20 minutes ago. He's officially a flight risk, which means no bail. He was trying to run, Elena breathed. He was trying to run, as Sarah confirmed, which tells us everything we need to know about his guilt. Innocent men don't flee the country when they hear grand juries are convening. They watch the news coverage from Dominic's penthouse. Victor Langston being arrested at O'Hare Airport, screaming about his rights and his lawyers and how he was being persecuted. The footage showed him in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his composure shattered. You can't do this, Victor was shouting at the officers. Do you know who I am? I'll have your badges. I'll destroy all of you. The officers ignored him, reading his rights in flat professional voices. As they pushed him into the police car, Victor looked directly at the camera, and Elena saw real fear in his eyes for the first time ever. He looks scared, she whispered. He should be, Dominic said softly, because tomorrow his world ends. That night, Elena met with all the other victims at a private room Margaret had arranged. 9 women, total 9 survivors who'd suffered in silence until Elena had given them permission to speak up. I never thought I'd see this day, Sophie said quietly. I thought I'd take what Victor did to me to my grave. Me too, Rebecca added, when the police officer laughed at me the first time I tried to report him. I gave up. Figured no one would ever believe me over a man like Victor Langston. But here we are, Jessica said. 9 of us, all believed, all ready to fight. Elena looked around the room at these women who'd survived the same monster. Tomorrow changes everything. Once the news breaks, once our names become public, Victor's lawyers will come for us. They'll try to discredit us, destroy our reputations, make us wish we'd stayed silent. Let them try, another woman, Maria Rodriguez, said fiercely. I've been scared of Victor Langston for 6 years. I'm done being afraid. We all are, Sophie agreed. They spent the next hour sharing their stories, finding the similarities, building a united front. By the time they left, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Not just for justice, but for healing. The news broke at midnight. Every major outlet in Chicago ran the story: prominent businessman, Victor Langston arrested on multiple rape charges. 9 victims come forward in decade-long pattern of abuse. Elena's phone exploded with notifications. Some were supportive strangers saying they believed her survivors, sharing their own stories. But others were vicious. Trolls calling her a liar, a gold digger, a whore who'd married a crime boss and was now trying to destroy innocent men. "Don't read those," Dominic said, taking the phone from her hands. "The people who matter believe you. The rest are just noise." "But what if the jury thinks like them? What if they see me as—" "They won't," Dominic interrupted, "because Sarah's going to make sure they hear from all 9 victims. They'll see the pattern, the evidence, the systematic abuse. One victim might be dismissed as vindictive. 9 victims with identical stories and documented evidence. That's undeniable." Elena wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. Victor has the best lawyers money can buy. What if they find a way? "Then we'll deal with it," Dominic said firmly. "But Elena, you need to trust the process. Trust the evidence. Trust that the truth will come out." 2 days later, Richard Whitmore's lawyers called. Her father wanted to see her. Wanted to explain, to apologize, to make things right before his arraignment. "Absolutely not," Dominic said immediately. "I want to go," Elena surprised herself by saying. "He'll manipulate you." "Maybe," Elena agreed, "but I need to see him one more time. I need to close that door myself." They met at the county jail in a private room reserved for attorney-client meetings. Richard looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit, his carefully maintained appearance destroyed by 2 days in lockup. "Elena, sweetheart." "I told you not to call me that," Elena said quietly. Richard's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry. For everything. If I could take it back." "You can't," Elena interrupted. "What's done is done. You sold me to Victor Langston to cover your gambling debts. You profited from my abuse for 5 years. You threatened me when I tried to escape. Those are facts. Apologies don't change them." I know I failed you. Failed your mother's memory. Failed everything I was supposed to be as a father." Richard's hands shook. "But I can make this right. I can testify against Victor, help put him away." "You're going to testify against Victor because your lawyers told you it's the only way to avoid 20 years in prison," Elena said flatly. "Not because you're sorry, not because you want to make amends, because you're trying to save yourself again." Richard flinched like she'd hit him. "I came here to tell you something," Elena continued. "I forgive you." Richard's eyes widened with hope. "I forgive you," Elena repeated. "Not because you deserve it, not because what you did was forgivable, but because I need to let go of the anger. I need to stop carrying your choices like they're weights around my neck." She leaned forward. "But forgiving you doesn't mean I want you in my life. After this trial, after you serve your sentence, I don't want to see you again. You're not my father anymore. You're just the man who failed to protect me when I needed it most." "Elena, please." "Goodbye, Richard." Elena stood. "I hope prison teaches you something about what it feels like to be powerless." She walked out without looking back. Behind her, she heard her father crying ugly, broken sounds that once would have made her turn around. But Elena kept walking. Some doors needed to stay closed. Outside the jail, Dominic was waiting by the car. He took one look at her face and pulled her into his arms. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," Elena said simply. "For the first time in 5 years, I feel free." The trial date was set for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Sarah worked to build an airtight case. Victor's lawyers, the infamous Morrison and Black, filed motion after motion trying to get evidence, suppressed, trying to separate the trials, trying anything to give their client an advantage. But Sarah blocked them at every turn. The evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear, the victims too credible. "They're panicking," Sarah told Elena during one of their prep sessions. "Morrison and Black doesn't take cases they think they'll lose. The fact that they're throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks, tells me they know they're in trouble." "What if they find something that works?" Elena asked. "They won't," Sarah said confidently. "We have medical evidence. We have 9 victims with identical stories. We have financial records proving your father facilitated the abuse. We have text messages where Langston explicitly instructed you when and where to meet him. And we have his attempted flight to Brazil, which proves consciousness of guilt. But the defense will argue that 9 women independently decided to lie about being assaulted by the same man, that your father facilitated consensual adult relationships and just happened to receive payments afterward, that all the medical evidence is coincidental. Sarah's smile was sharp. Let them argue it. No jury will believe that. The night before the trial, Elena couldn't sleep. She stood on Dominic's balcony, watching the city lights, thinking about how much had changed in 3 weeks. She'd gone from a terrified bride to a woman leading 9 other survivors in the fight against their abuser. You ready for tomorrow? Dominic appeared beside her with 2 glasses of whiskey. No, Elena admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. That's all courage is, Dominic said, being terrified and doing it anyway. Elena took the whiskey and drank the burn, grounding her. What if I freeze up on the stand? What if I can't get the words out? Then you take a breath and try again. Sarah will help you. I'll be there in the gallery. The other victims will be there. You're not alone in this, Elena. I keep thinking about Isabella, Elena said quietly. Your sister. She didn't have anyone to fight for her. But you're fighting for me. Why? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Because I failed her, because I was 17 and powerless, and I watched her die without being able to do anything about it. He turned to face Elena fully. But I'm not 17 anymore. I'm not powerless, and I'll be damned if I watch another woman suffer the way my sister did. Elena felt tears burn behind her eyes. Thank you for believing me, for fighting for me, for giving me the weapons I needed to fight back. You gave yourself those weapons, Dominic corrected. I just provided the resources. Everything else, the courage, the strength, the determination, that's all you. The trial began on a Monday morning, cold enough to freeze tears. Elena wore white, a deliberate choice. She was reclaiming the innocence Victor had tried to steal, turning it into armor. The courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, and supporters. Elena saw the other 8 victims sitting together in the gallery, a united front. She saw Dominic in the front row, his expression promising violence to anyone who dared attack her credibility. And she saw Victor sitting at the defense table in an expensive suit that couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. Victor's lead attorney, Harrison Burke, gave an opening statement that made Elena's blood boil. He painted Victor as a generous man who'd been targeted by unstable women seeking revenge and money. He suggested Dominic had orchestrated the whole thing as a business vendetta. He implied that 9 women had somehow coordinated identical false accusations. But then Sarah stood for her opening statement, and her voice rang through the courtroom like a bell. The defense wants you to believe that 9 women from different backgrounds, different cities, different ages, most of whom had never met before this trial, all independently decided to fabricate identical stories of sexual abuse. That stretches credulity past the breaking point. Sarah's eyes swept the jury. Over the next 2 weeks, you'll hear testimony from survivors. You'll see medical evidence documenting years of physical abuse. You'll read text messages where the defendant gave explicit instructions for secret meetings with a minor. You'll see financial records proving payments made to facilitate ongoing sexual access. And when you've seen all the evidence, you'll know beyond any reasonable doubt that Victor Langston is exactly what these brave women say. He is a serial rapist who spent a decade using his power to prey on the vulnerable. Elena testified first. For 2 days, she walked the jury through 5 years of systematic abuse. Sarah guided her through the worst moments with gentle precision, making sure every detail was documented. When Victor burned you with cigarettes, where specifically did he do it? Sarah asked. My inner thighs, places I could hide. Elena's voice was steady. He said if I showed anyone, if I told anyone, he'd make sure my father disowned me, that I'd end up homeless and alone with no one to believe me. Did you believe him? Yes, because he was right. The one time I tried to tell a family friend what was happening, she told me I should be grateful for Victor's attention, that most girls would be lucky to have a successful man interested in them. Burke cross-examined her brutally. Isn't it true, Mrs. Hale, that you married Mr. Hale specifically because of his wealth and in power? No, Elena said clearly. I married Dominic Hale because my father forced me to, the same way he forced me to see Victor Langston. But you benefit from that marriage, don't you? Luxury lifestyle, access to the best lawyers money can buy. I benefit from having someone who believes me, Elena shot back, something I never had before. Burke tried another angle. You claim Mr. Langston assaulted you repeatedly over 5 years. Why didn't you go to the police? Elena looked directly at the jury. Because I was 17 when it started. Because my father controlled my entire life, my phone, my money, my access to the outside world. Because the one time I tried to run away, my father threatened to have me arrested for theft. Because I was terrified and alone, and I didn't think anyone would believe me. She paused. And based on Mr. Burke's questions right now, I was right to be scared. The courtroom murmured. The judge called for order. Sophie testified next, describing her 8 months of abuse with devastating clarity. Then Rebecca, then Jessica, then all the others. Each story built on the last, creating an undeniable pattern of predatory behavior. When Dr. Harrison took the stand, granted immunity for his testimony, his confession destroyed what remained of Victor's defense. He admitted performing an illegal abortion on Elena, admitted Victor had paid him in cash, admitted he'd turned a blind eye to obvious signs of abuse because Langston was a valued client who sent him business. Did you know Elena Whitmore was being coerced? Sarah asked. I suspected, Harrison said quietly, but I didn't want to know for certain. It was easier to look the other way and collect my fee. Richard Whitmore's testimony was the final nail. Broken and desperate, Elena's father admitted everything: the arrangement with Victor, the payments, the willful blindness to his daughter's suffering. Why did you do it? Sarah asked. Richard looked at Elena for the first time since taking the stand. Because I'm a coward. Because I valued money over my daughter. Because I told myself she'd be fine, that Victor cared about her, that this was just a business arrangement that happened to involve my child. His voice broke. I was wrong. I destroyed my daughter to save myself from bankruptcy, and I'll never forgive myself for that. Victor never took the stand. His lawyers advised against it, knowing Sarah would eviscerate him on cross-examination. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Elena sat in the courthouse hallway with the other victims, unable to breathe, unable to think. 8 hours felt like 8 years. Finally, the bailiff emerged. Juries reached a verdict. The courtroom filled in tense silence. Elena gripped Dominic's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. The jury filed in their faces, unreadable. On the count of rape in the first degree, how do you find the defendant guilty? Elena's breath hitched. On the count of sexual assault of a minor, guilty. Tears streamed down her face. On the count of human trafficking. Guilty. Count after count. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 28 counts total. Victor Langston was found guilty on every single charge. Victor's face went gray. His lawyer slumped. Behind Elena, the other victims sobbed with relief. Elena turned to look at Victor one last time. He was staring at her with pure hatred, his mask finally dropping to reveal the monster underneath. But Elena wasn't afraid anymore. She'd won. Sentencing was set for 2 weeks later. In the interim, the media exploded. Every outlet wanted interviews with the survivors, with Sarah Reeves, with anyone connected to what was already being called the biggest sex trafficking case in Chicago history. Elena refused all interview requests. She wasn't interested in being famous or becoming the face of a movement. She just wanted Victor Langston to pay for what he'd done. But the world had other plans. A women's advocacy group reached out asking if Elena would speak at their annual conference. A lawyer from the Innocence Project wanted to discuss reforming laws around coerced testimony. 3 publishers offered book deals. A documentary filmmaker requested access to the trial footage. You don't have to do any of this, Dominic said when Elena showed him the stack of requests. You don't owe anyone your story. I know, Elena said slowly. But what if sharing my story helps someone else? What if there's another girl out there right now going through what I went through, thinking she's alone? Then she'll see the trial coverage and know she's not alone, Dominic pointed out. Maybe, but what if she needs more than that? What if she needs someone to tell her explicitly, you can fight back, you can win, you are strong enough to survive this? Elena looked at the requests again. I'm not ready to do interviews or write a book, but the advocacy group, I think I could do that. The conference was in 3 days. Elena spent the time working with Margaret to craft a speech that was honest without being gratuitous, empowering and without minimizing the trauma. The night before the conference, Sophie called. I saw you're speaking tomorrow, Sophie said. I want to come to support you, if that's okay. Of course it's okay, Elena said, surprised and touched. Rebecca and Jessica want to come too. Actually was saying, all 9 of us want to be there. Sophie's voice was warm. You gave us the courage to speak up. We want to give you courage to keep speaking. Elena felt tears burn. Thank you. The conference was held in a hotel ballroom packed with survivors, advocates, lawyers, and activists. Elena stood backstage, her heart hammering, watching the crowd fill in. You don't have to do this, Dominic said quietly. He'd insisted on coming, positioning himself as her bodyguard and support system. I want to, Elena said. I need to. When her name was called, Elena walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. She stood at the podium and looked out at hundreds of faces, women who'd survived their own hells, who carried their own scars. My name is Elena Hale. She began, her voice steady despite her nerves. 6 weeks ago, I was a terrified bride married to a stranger to settle my father's debts. Today, I'm a survivor who helped put her rapist away for life. This is how I got here. She told her story, not all of it, not the worst parts, but enough. Enough to make it clear what she'd endured, what she'd overcome, what it had cost her. And then she talked about the other 8 women who'd found their courage to speak up. I used to think I was alone, Elena said. I thought I was the only one who'd suffered this way, the only one who'd been violated and discarded. But I was wrong. There were 8 other women who knew exactly what I'd been through. 8 other women who'd survived the same monster. And together we were strong enough to bring him down. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Victor Langston spent 10 years making me believe I was worthless, that I deserved what happened to me, that speaking up would only make things worse. He was wrong about all of it. Elena's voice strengthened. I'm not worthless. I'm a survivor. I didn't deserve what happened to me. No one deserves that. And speaking up didn't make things worse. It made things better. It gave me my power back. The applause when she finished was deafening. But what Elena would remember most was the moment afterward when a young woman approached her with tears streaming down her face. Thank you, the woman whispered. I've been too scared to report what my boss has been doing to me. But hearing you speak, I think I'm ready now. Elena took the woman's hand. You are ready, and you're not alone. There are people who will believe you, who will fight for you, who will help you get justice. How do I start? Elena gave her Sarah Reeves' contact information. Call this number. Tell them I sent you. They'll help you. Over the next week, Elena received dozens of messages from women who'd heard her speak. Some were ready to report their abusers. Others just needed someone to believe them. Elena responded to every single one, connecting them with resources, offering support, sharing her own journey. You're building an army, Dominic observed one evening as Elena answered emails. I'm building a community, Elena corrected. There are so many women suffering in silence. If I can give them a voice, give them hope. She trailed off. You want to make this permanent, Dominic said. It wasn't a question. I want to start a foundation, legal aid for assault survivors, therapy funding, emergency housing for women escaping abusive situations, job placement help. Everything I wished I'd had. Elena looked at Dominic. Is that crazy? No, Dominic said slowly. It's smart, and it's a good way to turn your trauma into something productive. He pulled out his phone. How much funding do you need? I don't know. I haven't even started planning. Start with $5 million, Dominic said casually, typing on his phone. I'll have my accountants set up the foundation tomorrow. You can hire staff, find office space, build the infrastructure. By the time Langston's sentenced, you'll be operational. Elena stared at him. You're just giving me $5 million. I'm investing in something important, Dominic corrected. Consider it my penance for all the times I wasn't there for Isabella. Sentencing day arrived cold and gray. Elena wore black this time, not in mourning but in preparation for war, because she knew Victor would try one last time to hurt her, to make her doubt herself, to steal her victory. The courtroom was packed. Every victim was present along with their families, supporters, and a small army of reporters. Victor sat at the defense table looking diminished, his expensive suit unable to hide the toll prison had taken on him. Judge Martinez entered, and the room fell silent. Victor Langston, you have been found guilty of 28 counts, including rape, sexual assault, human trafficking, and witness tampering. The judge removed her glasses. Before I pass sentence, I want to say something. In 23 years on the bench, I have never encountered such systematic, calculated predatory abuse. You didn't just hurt these women physically. You broke their spirits, destroyed their sense of self-worth, made them believe they deserved the violence you inflicted on them. You used your wealth and power to prey on the vulnerable, and you showed absolutely no remorse even when confronted with overwhelming evidence of your crimes. Victor's lawyer started to speak, but Judge Martinez held up a hand. I've read the victim impact statements, all 9 of them. I've heard the testimony. I've reviewed the evidence, and I've seen enough. The judge's voice went cold. On each count of rape in the first degree, I sentence you to 25 years to run consecutively. On each count of sexual assault, 20 years consecutive. On each count of human trafficking, 30 years consecutive. On witness tampering and obstruction, 15 years consecutive. Total sentence, 470 years in prison without possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted. Elena heard herself sob, a sound of pure relief and vindication. You'll die in prison, Judge Martinez continued speaking directly to Victor. You'll never hurt another woman again. And I hope that every day for the rest of your miserable life, you think about the lives you destroyed and the justice that finally caught up with you. As Victor was led away, he turned and looked directly at Elena. His expression promised murder, vengeance, eternal hatred. But Elena wasn't afraid. Because Victor Langston was going to rot in a cell until he died, and she was going to live. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Sarah gave a statement praising the victim's courage. Margaret announced civil suits against Victor's estate, and Elena stood beside Dominic and faced the cameras without fear. I have something to say. Elena's voice rang out. The crowd quieted. For 10 years, Victor Langston used his power to hurt vulnerable women. He made us believe we were worthless, that we deserved what he did to us, that speaking up would only make things worse. He was wrong about all of it. She paused, making sure every camera was focused on her. We're not worthless. We're survivors. We didn't deserve what happened to us. It was his choice, his crime, his evil. And speaking up didn't make things worse. It made things better. It gave us justice. Elena's voice strengthened. To every woman who's watching this and wondering if she should report her abuser, you should. You deserve justice. You deserve to be believed. You deserve to be safe, and there are people who will fight for you. The applause was deafening. Behind Elena, the other 8 victims stood in solidarity. Sophie, Rebecca, Jessica, Maria, and the others. 9 women who'd survived the same monster and emerged stronger. Richard Whitmore was sentenced 3 days later. True to the plea deal, he received 7 years for conspiracy and facilitation of trafficking. Elena didn't attend the sentencing. She'd said her goodbye to her father. He was dead to her now. 2 months later, the Hale Foundation for Survivor Support officially opened its doors. Elena hired Sophie as legal director, Rebecca to run outreach, and Jessica to manage the crisis hotline. Within the first week, they'd helped 15 women escape abusive situations. Within the first month, they'd provided legal aid to 40 survivors pressing charges against their abusers. Within the first year, they'd changed laws in Illinois regarding testimony from trafficking victims and secured funding for 50 therapists specializing in trauma recovery. Elena threw herself into the work with fierce determination. Every woman she helped felt like honoring Isabella's memory. Every predator brought to justice felt like keeping Victor Langston's legacy from spreading. But in the quiet moments late at night when the work was done, Elena had to face the hardest question. What about her marriage she and Dominic had started as a business arrangement? Then they'd become allies in war. But what were they now that the war was won 6 months after Victor's sentencing? Elena finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. What are we doing? She asked Dominic one night as they sat on the balcony overlooking Chicago. What do you mean? This marriage, Victor, it started as a transaction. Then it became a battle strategy. But the battle's over now. Victor's in prison. My father's in prison. The foundation is running smoothly. Elena turned to face him. So what are we doing? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to be doing? I don't know, Elena admitted. 6 months ago, I would have said I wanted a divorce. I wanted my freedom, wanted to start fresh somewhere. Victor and my father couldn't find me. But now, she trailed off. Now I don't want to leave. The admission felt dangerous. I like what we've built together. I like fighting beside you. I like that you see me as strong instead of broken. She stopped herself. You like me, Dominic finished softly. Maybe, Elena allowed. Is that crazy to develop feelings for the man I was forced to marry? Probably, Dominic said. But then again, we're both pretty crazy. He reached over and took her hand. For what it's worth, I like you too. I like your strength, your courage, your refusal to stay down even when the world tried to crush you. I like that you turned your trauma into purpose. I like that you're not afraid of me. I'm a little afraid of you, Elena admitted. Good. You should be. I'm a dangerous man. Dominic's smile was genuine. But I would never hurt you, Elena. That's the difference between me and the men who came before. I'll protect you, fight for you, kill for you if necessary, but I won't hurt you. So where does that leave us? Wherever you want us to be. Dominic squeezed her hand. If you want a divorce, we'll get one. I'll make sure you're set up financially, that the foundation stays funded, that you have everything you need to build your own life. If you want to stay married but live separately, we can do that. Or if you want to try making this marriage real, he let the sentence hang. Elena thought about it. 6 months ago, the idea of willingly staying married to Dominic Hale would have seemed insane. But now, after everything they'd been through together, after watching him fight for her when no one else would, I want to try, Elena said. I want to see if we can build something real from this broken beginning. Then that's what we'll do. Dominic pulled her closer. But Elena, we do this on your timeline. If you're not ready for physical intimacy, we don't do it. If you need separate rooms for the next 10 years, you get separate rooms. This marriage, if we're making it real, it'll be built on your comfort and your choices. Always. Elena felt tears burn behind her eyes. You're not what I expected. Neither are you, Dominic said softly. I expected a transaction. I got a warrior. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker below. And for the first time since her 17th birthday, Elena felt something she'd thought was lost forever: peace. The foundation's first anniversary arrived with unseasonable warmth and unexpected challenges. Elena had helped over 200 women escape abusive situations, funded therapy for 300 survivors, and successfully prosecuted 47 predators. But success brought new problems. We're getting death threats, Sophie said grimly, dropping a folder on Elena's desk. From men we've helped put away from their supporters, from random internet trolls who think we're lying about assault statistics. Elena flipped through the threatening emails and messages. Some were garden variety misogyny. Others were specific and terrifying, detailing exactly what the writers wanted to do to Elena and the other foundation members. We need better security, Rebecca added. 3 of our clients have reported being followed. One had her car vandalized. This is escalating. Elena looked at the evidence and felt old fear trying to creep back in. But she'd learned over the past year that fear was information, not a command. These threats were meant to silence her. She refused to be silenced. Dominic, she called out. Her husband, because that's what he was now, truly and completely appeared in her office doorway. They'd moved into the brownstone he'd bought them, had slowly built a real marriage from the ashes of their forced arrangement. It wasn't perfect. Elena still had nightmares about Victor. Dominic still struggled with his own demons about failing Isabella. But they were building something genuine. We have a problem, Elena said, showing him the threats. Dominic's expression went lethal. I'll have security teams on everyone by tonight. The office, the shelter, every employee's home. Anyone who comes near you or your people will regret it. That's not sustainable long-term, Elena argued. We can't live in a fortress forever. Watch me, Dominic said flatly. You've made enemies, Elena. Powerful men who hate that you've given their victims the courage to fight back. They'll try to intimidate you, hurt you, make an example of you to scare other women into silence. So what do? We make an example of them first. Dominic's smile was cold. Every man who's threatened you, I'll have investigated. We'll find their crimes, and they all have crimes, and we'll make sure they face justice. We fight back twice as hard. Over the next month, Dominic made good on his promise. 5 men who'd sent death threats were arrested on various charges ranging from fraud to assault. 3 others were publicly exposed for their own histories of abuse. The message was clear: threatening Elena Hale came with consequences. But the biggest threat came from an unexpected source. Morrison and Black Victor's former law firm filed suit against the foundation, claiming Elena had defamed Victor Langston and caused irreparable harm to his reputation and business interests. They were seeking $50 million in damages. This is insane, Elena said, reading the lawsuit. Victor was convicted on 28 counts. How can they claim I defamed him? Because they're desperate, Margaret explained. Langston's estate is being liquidated to pay restitution to his victims. His family is trying to salvage something from the wreckage. This lawsuit is a Hail Mary they know they'll probably lose, but they're hoping to intimidate you into settling. I'm not settling, Elena said firmly. Good. Margaret smiled. Because I've been waiting for an excuse to destroy Morrison and Black in court. The lawsuit became a media circus. Every outlet covered it, debating whether Elena had gone too far in her advocacy or whether Morrison and Black was engaging in victim intimidation. The foundation received unprecedented donations as supporters rallied to Elena's defense. But the lawsuit also brought unwanted attention. Old enemies surfaced. Men Elena had helped put away tried to file appeals, citing the lawsuit as evidence of her unreliability as a witness. The foundation's clients started getting harassed. This is exactly what they wanted, Sophie said bitterly. They wanted to make helping survivors so difficult, so dangerous, that we'd give up. Then they don't know us very well, Elena replied. We don't give up. The trial began in September, exactly 1 year after Victor's sentencing. Elena took the stand and defended every word she'd ever said about Victor Langston. Did you defame Mr. Langston? Morrison and Black's lead attorney asked. No, Elena said clearly. I told the truth about what he did to me and 8 other women. Truth isn't defamation. But you've built an entire foundation on this narrative. I've built a foundation on helping survivors, Elena interrupted. Survivors like the 200 women we've helped escape abuse. Survivors like the 300 we've funded therapy for. Survivors like the 47 who found the courage to press charges against their abusers because they saw that justice was possible. Your foundation has cost numerous men their careers, their reputations. Their victims cost them that, Elena shot back. When you rape someone, when you abuse someone, when you destroy someone's life, you don't get to complain about consequences. The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge called for order, but even she looked approving. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. We find in favor of the defendant, Elena Hale, the foreman announced. Furthermore, we find that this lawsuit was filed in bad faith and recommend sanctions against the plaintiff's legal team for abuse of process. Elena felt vindication surge through her. Morrison and Black had tried to silence her, and they'd failed spectacularly. But the victory came with a cost. That night, someone threw a brick through the foundation's window with a note attached, "You should have stayed silent." Elena stared at the broken glass and felt something inside her harden. These men, these pathetic, violent men who couldn't stand the idea of women fighting back, they wanted her afraid. They wanted her to retreat, to stop helping survivors to disappear. I'm not going anywhere, Elena said aloud to the empty office. Damn right you're not, Dominic said from the doorway. He'd come as soon as the security company called. But we are upgrading security. Bulletproof glass, armed guards, the works. That's not the answer, Elena argued. We can't let them turn this place into a fortress. Survivors need to feel safe here, not like they're entering a war zone. They need to be safe, period. Dominic's voice was firm. Elena, you're making enemies of dangerous men. They will escalate. We need to be prepared. So what do you suggest? I suggest we go on offense. Dominic pulled out his phone. I've been investigating the men behind these threats. Most of them have connections to each other. They're part of a network that protects abusers, intimidates victims, keeps the whole system running. What if we expose that network? Make it public? Elena felt a dangerous excitement building. You mean go after the system, not just individual predators? Exactly. We find the lawyers who defend rapists by destroying victims, the judges who give light sentences, the police who ignore assault reports, the businessmen who provide alibis and hush money. We expose all of them systematically until there's nowhere left for predators to hide. That's a war, Elena said slowly. Yes, Dominic agreed. It is. But you've already been fighting a war, Elena. Now I'm just suggesting we expand the battlefield. Over the next 6 months, Elena and Dominic systematically exposed corruption in Chicago's handling of sexual assault cases. They found judges who'd dismissed credible assault allegations, prosecutors who'd refused to file charges, defense attorneys who'd used victim-blaming tactics, police who'd lost rape kits or discouraged women from reporting. Each exposure led to resignations, investigations, and reforms. The foundation became a powerhouse feared by predators and celebrated by survivors. But success brought new challenges. Elena was exhausted running on coffee and determination barely sleeping as she juggled foundation work, legal battles, and her own healing journey. "You need to slow down," Dominic said one night when he found her working at 2 a.m. "I can't," Elena replied. "There are too many women who need help, and you can't help them if you burn out." Dominic closed her laptop gently. "Elena, you've done incredible work, but you're one person. You can't save everyone." "I have to try." "Why?" Dominic asked gently. "Why do you have to personally save every survivor?" Elena felt tears burn behind her eyes. "Because if I'd had this foundation when I was 17, maybe I wouldn't have suffered for 5 years. Maybe I would have found the courage to speak up sooner. Maybe, Dominic interrupted softly, but you can't rewrite your past by working yourself to death in the present. You survived, Elena. You won. Now you need to let yourself heal." "I don't know how," Elena admitted. "Every time I stop working, every time I slow down, the memories come back. Victor, my father, the years of abuse, it all floods back and I can't breathe." "Have you talked to a therapist about this?" "I fund therapy for other survivors," Elena said weakly. "That's not the same as getting therapy yourself." Dominic pulled her into his arms. "Elena, you can't pour from an empty cup. You need to take care of yourself too." The next week, Elena started seeing Dr. Rachel Morrison, a trauma specialist who'd worked with the Foundation's clients. The first session was brutal. Elena had spent so long being strong for others that she'd forgotten how to be vulnerable for herself. "You're carrying survivor's guilt," Dr. Morrison said after hearing Elena's story. "You feel guilty that you had resources to fight back when other victims don't. You feel guilty that you survived when Isabella didn't. You feel guilty for every moment of happiness because you think you should be working instead." "Isn't that reasonable?" Elena asked. "I have so much privilege now, money, power, protection. Shouldn't I be using it to help others?" "You are helping others," Dr. Morrison said firmly. "But you are also a human being who experienced profound trauma. You deserve to heal, to rest, to build a life that's about more than just your pain." Elena started therapy twice a week. She learned to set boundaries, to delegate foundation work, to take time for herself without guilt. It was harder than fighting Victor in court, harder than confronting her father, harder than anything she'd done. But slowly, Elena started to heal. She and Dominic grew closer. What had started as a marriage of convenience had evolved into genuine partnership, mutual respect, and Elena was surprised to realize love. "I love you," she told him one night, the words feeling foreign and wonderful on her tongue. Dominic's expression softened. "I love you too. I didn't expect to. When we got married, I thought this would be a business arrangement that maybe turned into friendship. But you," he touched her face gently, "you're extraordinary, Elena Hale. You turned your trauma into purpose, your pain into power. You saved yourself and then you saved hundreds of others. How could I not love that?" They made love that night for the first time, gentle, careful with Dominic, constantly checking that Elena was okay, that she wanted this, that she felt safe. It was nothing like the violence Victor had inflicted. This was healing. This was choice. This was love. Afterward, Elena cried, not from pain but from relief. Victor had tried to make her believe she was broken, that she could never enjoy intimacy again. But here she was in Dominic's arms, whole and strong and capable of joy. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me as more than my trauma, for fighting for me, for loving me even though I'm still healing." "You don't need to thank me for that," Dominic said softly. "Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." 2 years after Victor's sentencing, Elena gave a TED Talk that went viral. She spoke about transforming trauma into advocacy, about the power of survivor networks, about why believing women matters. "I saw your story," the girl said, crying. "I thought maybe someone would believe me." Elena pulled the girl into a hug. "I believe you, and we're going to help you. You're not alone anymore." As she connected the girl with lawyers, therapists, and safe housing, Elena felt something settle in her chest. This was why she'd fought so hard. Not for revenge, not even for justice, though those mattered. She'd fought so that the next 17-year-old girl wouldn't have to suffer in silence for 5 years. So that someone would believe her. So that she'd have the resources to escape, to heal, to rebuild. Elena had survived. But more importantly, she'd made sure future survivors would have a better chance at survival too. 5 years after Victor's sentencing, Elena stood on the balcony of the brownstone she shared with Dominic, watching the sun set over Chicago. The city had been the backdrop to her greatest trauma. Now it was the backdrop to her greatest triumph. The foundation had expanded to 12 cities. They'd helped over 1,000 survivors. They'd changed laws in 18 states. They'd put hundreds of predators in prison. But the work wasn't done. It would never be done. As long as there were men who used power to hurt others, there would be need for the foundation's services. "You okay?" Dominic asked, joining her on the balcony. "I'm good," Elena said. And she meant it. She still had nightmares sometimes. She still carried scars visible and invisible, but she was good. "I was thinking," Dominic said slowly, "what if we expanded the foundation internationally? There are survivors everywhere who need help." Elena smiled, always thinking bigger. "I learned from the best." Dominic pulled her close. "You've built something incredible, dearly, Elena. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into hope for thousands of people." "We built it," Elena corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "We're a good team." "The best," Elena agreed. As they stood together, watching the city lights flicker to life, Elena thought about the terrified 17-year-old girl she'd been. That girl had believed she was worthless, broken beyond saving. But that girl had been wrong. She'd been strong enough to survive, strong enough to fight back, strong enough to win, and strong enough to help others do the same. Victor Langston had tried to destroy her. Instead, he'd forged her into something unbreakable. Elena Hale wasn't a victim anymore. She wasn't even just a survivor. She was a warrior, a leader, a force for change. And she was just getting started. Because the fight against predators, against systems that protected abusers, against cultures that silenced victims that fight, would continue. And Elena would be on the front lines, armed with her truth, her courage, and the army of survivors she'd helped build. Victor Langston was rotting in prison, forgotten and powerless. Richard Whitmore would die behind bars, a cautionary tale about fathers who failed their daughters. But Elena was alive. Elena was free. Elena was powerful, and nothing, not trauma, not fear, not the men who tried to break her, could ever take that away. She'd survived hell and come out the other side with her soul intact and her purpose clear. That was her victory. That was her truth. And that was why she would never, ever stop fighting for survivors who needed someone to believe in them the way Dominic had believed in her. Elena Hale had been forged in fire. And now she was using that fire to light the way for others still trapped in darkness. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in years, Elena knew with absolute certainty that she was strong enough to keep fighting. Forever, if that's what it took. Because survivors didn't just survive. They thrived, they rebuilt, they conquered. And Elena Hale had conquered everything.